Okay. Well, hello, I'm Paul Gibson, co-founder of Retake Our Democracy, and Roxanne Barber just went to turn off the phone so it doesn't interrupt us. I want to welcome you to this Zoominar. Today's Zoominar will focus on the 2021 legislative session and how the 2020 election has sort of altered the legislative makeup and impacted what might be possible. And also how COVID will could change both the process and what might be possible. Our panelists tonight are Senate Leader Peter Wirth, Senate Pro-Tem-elect, I'm not sure if that's an officially correct way to put that, Mimi Stewart, we debated that for quite a while, and Speaker Brian Egolf. So we want to welcome all three of you. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that we're hosting this on stolen land, stolen Tewa land, and we want to thank the Tewa people for being such tremendous stewards of this land for centuries. And I also want to encourage all of you to sign up to be part of our 2021 legislative strategy, which we'll talk about in this Zoom. And you'll find information in the chat. You'll find links to our strategy, our 2021 legislative strategy, the bills that we're supporting, and info about how you can get involved. In particular, we're doing a Zoom conversation on Friday at 3:30 for advocates to talk about our strategy. So you'll get all that information in the chat.
I pasted it in at the very beginning of the chat. So you just need to take that little scroll bar and scroll all the way up to the top if you want to get those links. And I just want to say before we get started too, that I hope you're all staying healthy during this really difficult time. If any of you have been impacted health-wise or economic-wise, our hearts go out to you. And I hope that those of you who can are helping others in need at this time. And I hope you're all staying healthy. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. And if you've been on our Zoominars before, you know most of this, but we always get new people, so we like to just go over it. I'll just take a minute to go over it. We have a set of questions that we will be asking Senator Stewart, Senator Wirth, and Representative Egolf for the first roughly an hour. And then at 7:30, we're going to go to your questions. And you need to post those questions in the Q&A. And Q&A is one of the little icons down at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see icons at the bottom of your screen, then hover your cursor down there and they should pop up for you. You can use the chat icon is down there as well, to say hello to people, to make comments, but we're not going to be looking at the questions from the chat. The questions that we'll get to at 7:30, you need to put in the Q&A. And I just want to suggest to you that before you start putting questions in the Q&A, you might want to wait at least till we're halfway through our initial discussion, because what usually happens is a lot of the questions that people have at the beginning wind up getting answered in the course of our discussion. Okay. Let me see what else. This is a webinar format on Zoom, so we can see attendees' names, but we can't hear you and you can't raise your hand. The only thing you can do is chat or Q&A. And just want to make sure people knew that. And then, also the view in the black box where you see the video screens of all the four boxes. You can change your view. If you're just seeing one speaker at a time, that's speaker view. You can change it up in the top right-hand corner to gallery view. There's a little box that has 3, 6, 9 squares in it, and that's where you click for your view. So we would recommend that you use gallery view, then you can see all the panelists' faces at the same time.
One more housekeeping thing, Roxanne will repost the information we talked about, because people who have gotten on since it was posted don't see it.
The links?
Yes. So after you ask the first question, maybe you can do that.
All right, okay. All right.
We're off to the races, folks.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome especially to our panelists. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us tonight. We really appreciate it. So the first question is for Senator Wirth. And we want to know, as your chamber is, the Senate chamber is the one that's undergone the most change after the elections this year. How has the primary and general election reshaped the New Mexico Senate? And how might that reshaping impact the prospects of getting some bills passed this year that have failed in the past?
Well, let me just start, Paul and Roxanne, by thanking you for the invitation, and to all the folks out there watching. We're certainly delighted to be here and share some insights moving forward. Speaker Egolf and I have done town halls, kind of leading into sessions for many, many years, and it really is a good chance for a back and forth to hear issues, and so we appreciate the opportunity. There is no question that even though folks look at our numbers and see a pickup of 1 seat in the New Mexico State Senate, a pickup of 1 that we're very proud of, we have 7 new Democratic senators. And we've been caucusing with our new group, and I have to say that it is extraordinarily refreshing to have these 7 members that bring so much to the caucus already. We are very, very excited. So how did we get through this election season, which was challenging for sure? We had 6 seats, basically 5 that were primary changes, and then Senator Sapien's seat. So 6 of our seats flipped over, and our priority number 1 was holding those 6 seats. We were able to hold 4 of those 6 seats. The real fights were in Silver City for Saya Correa Hemphill in that Senate seat. That's one that was very important to us. There's a long history with Senator Altamirano, Senator Morales, and so we were able to hold that seat. Also, Brenda McKenna in Senate District 9, Senator Sapien's seat. That has been a 50-50 swing seat that Senator Sapien was able to win by a couple hundred votes at best in his 3 elections. And so we were super excited to see her make it through that seat. And then, of course, Carrie Hamblin was able to hold the Mary Kay Papin seat, and Leo Jaramillo held the seat of Richard Martinez. What that meant, though, is that had we not aggressively gone after Republican seats, and we had 4 seats that we targeted, we would have lost 2 seats and gone from 26 to 24. And I can tell you there's a huge difference between 24 and 26. I've served with both those numbers, but we made the decision, and I want to give a shout out to Senator Stewart, who one of the first things I asked of her in 2017 was to lead our caucus effort, and this was the culmination of that effort. But we targeted 3 seats in Albuquerque and also a seat in Belen, the Michael Sanchez seat. And we were able to win 3 of those seats in Albuquerque. Senator Payne's seat was an open seat, and Dr. Martin Hickey won there. And then the Senator Rue and the Senator Gould seat, we were able to flip those seats to Democrats. So because of that, that's what got our numbers to a net gain of 1. And so I think that it will have profound implications on our ability to do a whole number of things. And when you go through an election cycle like this and the voters speak in the way that they spoke very clearly on a variety of issues we'll talk about tonight, I think it's incumbent on us to come in and really deliver on those issues. And I just feel strongly that we're going to be in a place in the state Senate to be able to do that. So big changes, and thank you to all the folks out there listening who worked on these campaigns and helped. We appreciate it a bunch.
Well, thank you, Peter. We will remind you of your commitment to getting all these good bills through soon. The next question is for Speaker Egolf. How do you expect COVID to impact the legislative process and the scope of bills that might be considered. I read recently from Representative Martinez that the process constraints during COVID might reduce the number of bills heard. Could you update us on like how it's going to, if you know how it's going to function, and what the impact might be from COVID?
Sure. So Roxanne and Paul, thank you for the invitation, and Madam President-elect and Leader Wirth, it's nice to see you. And to everyone that is, what are we doing? Are we webinaring together? Are we Zooming together? To all of us Zooming and webinaring together, thanks for taking time out to come together to hear from us. So the legislative process is no different than everything else in the world right now, in that it is very much affected by COVID. And we've gone through 2 special sessions. In the House, we had rule changes that allowed us to conduct our floor sessions and our committees completely virtually. We did have a few members that wanted or insisted on being present on the floor. For the most part, those were the Republican members, especially in the 7-hour special session we just had last week. The only Democrats on the floor were me, the floor leader, Cheryl Williams Stapleton, Doreen Gallegos, our whip, and Wanda Johnson, our caucus chair, and then the entire Republican caucus. Everyone else was participating virtually. The building, unfortunately, had to be closed to the public. And we do that because we want to prioritize the health and safety of the public, of the legislative staff, and of the legislators. And I always like to say in that order, right? Keeping the public safe and healthy is top of mind. And given the narrow corridors, the low ceilings, and the small committee rooms, which feel cramped and sometimes muggy, even in the best of circumstances, in the time of COVID, we aren't willing to take that risk with the health and safety of the public. So we are looking at a variety of options. I think at this point, it is very likely the Capitol building will be closed to the public. We are having scientists from Los Alamos National Laboratories in to help us create a model of the building, airflow modeling, so we can see what, if anything, could be done safely in the building. We want to have a building-specific analysis so that we can make the best science-driven decision. We've also been in conversations with the city of Santa Fe to see if there's an option that would let us use the convention center for committee meetings. But if that option doesn't pan out, or we're unable to open the building to the public, then committee meetings will be available for public participation by Zoom. We did one today, different platform, WebEx, as part of Courts, Corrections, and Justice Committee. Got great public participation. People are brought out of the waiting room and into the committee. During our special session just last week and the one in June, our House committees had tremendous public participation through Zoom. And it's important to remember that even though the building itself is closed, for the first time, you're now able to speak to a legislative committee from anywhere in the world. So if you are from rural New Mexico, if you are living in Southeast New Mexico in Las Cruces, or up in Farmington, or up in Raton, you no longer have to drive hours and hours and hours if you want to speak to a committee. And so that's a change that we may keep even after the pandemic, because we are opening up that part of the process. And we're looking lastly at ways to set up regularly scheduled Zoom office hours for legislators so that they can have some interaction with their constituents. We're losing that ability to bump into a member in the hallway and have a quick chat. As Paul, you and I have done, I step out of committee and we have a chat in the hallway. That's not going to be possible. And so it's going to have to be either by text, office hours, or phone calls. And we are in the House looking at reducing the number of bills. We're going to have another caucus on that in a few weeks. But reducing the number, other states like Colorado have done that to try to ease up the flow. And then lastly, we're looking at an option where we would come in introduce all the legislation, and then have no floor session for like 2 or 3 weeks, and only have committees meeting where they would pass the bills one committee to the next, and then we'd have a week of floor session where all we would do is meet from like 8 or 9 in the morning to 5 or 6 in the evening, and just send bills to Senators Stewart and Wirth, and they might do the same back to us. So
5 or 6. You mean like 9, 10, 11, 12?
Well, yeah. I mean, we'll see. There is conversation about how long we're going to spend debating each bill. So there's a few things in the air, but it's going to be very different. It's not going to have any of the fun stuff that people like about legislative sessions. The conservation voters reception in the evening is not going to happen. We're not going to have the the ability for that social interaction, which I think is a real shame. But it's important that we get together in January and get our work done, because the people of New Mexico elected us to do a job. We see the job is pressing, it's urgent, and we need to get there and get the work done and get it done safely.
Okay, well, thank you, Speaker Egolf. I'd just like to mention to our panelists that we have kind of times that you guys have on your questions that we have to try and adhere to in terms of how much time to respond to each question. And we've been over by a minute or two on each of these. And if we continue that pattern, we will wind up running over into the questions from your constituents.
Or we can.
I'm really sorry that Senator Wirth ran over. I'll urge him not to.
I'm sure. So this one is for Senator Stewart, and she actually has an extra minute on this one. Another factor affecting what bills will pass is the selection of committee chairs, committee members, and which committee bills are assigned to it. We know that Senator Wirth will be the one assigning the bills to committees, but you're going to be the one picking the committee chairs and the committee members. I think it's no secret that in the past, so many important bills passed the House and died in the Senate, and often died in the Senate Finance or Senate Corporations Committee, most often without a hearing. I'm wondering if how you're going to be able to use your position as pro-tem to maybe ensure that we have a smoother path to the governor's desk.
Well, I want to thank Roxanne and Paul for inviting me. I know I'm not the usual person. This is usually a Santa Fe thing, so I appreciate being invited and appreciate everybody's well wishes in the chat. So first of all, I'm not really the pro-tem until the election on the opening day. So that's a good thing for me, because it gives me enough time to talk to every member of the Senate about where he or she feels the best. What committees do they really want to be in? Do they really want to take on the job of chair or vice chair? We have 7 new members that are so anxious. Every one of them have already told me what committees they want to be on. And most of them want to be on committees that have been problems in the past, because they've heard the same thing that everyone else has, and that is the bill died in this committee, the bill died in this committee. So I'm in the process of really talking to my colleagues to try to figure out where people could serve the best. And I'm not going to do this just by myself. I'm going to be working with our majority leader, our whip, and our caucus chair. And we've elected one of our brand new members as our caucus chair, Senator-elect Brenda McKenna, who's on the chat, I see, as are several new members. So the committees are important. The chairs and vice chairs are very important. Lucky for us, we have these 7 brand new people that are coming with very positive attitudes and an agenda already, with things that they think we have not been able to do in the past and they would like us to see. So these committees are already going to be more prone towards solid democratic value bills. I know this because I have been talking to all of them already. So it's not going to be difficult because we have what Peter Wirth is calling our happy caucus. When we get together with these new people, we're just all so happy to be there. And the attitudes and the feelings that they're bringing are giving us a lot of energy in our caucus. We're excited about them coming in and all of their great new ideas. And it's time for new blood and younger blood and different chairmanships. And so I'm going to take my time. I'm going to do it in concert with the other leaders, and only after I've done a lot of soul searching with people. I have 10 new members who've asked to be chair of finance. That includes 4 who've never even served on the committee. So that's going to be a rough one. And I really am going to talk with each one of them to see how they might change that committee, because it's been an issue for years that most of the members of the Senate do not have access to the budgetary committee. And so I want to know from the committee itself how they could change. I want to know from those possible chairs how they might change it. And then, you know, we'll make the best decision we can, but it's not going to be anytime soon. So everyone should just relax about that. You're on mute, Roxanne.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I was just saying thank you. Thank you. I liked a lot of what you just said. The next question's for Senator Wirth. So, you know, we've talked about how COVID could impact and the maybe new committee membership and chairship is going to impact the session. But what about the budget? So we've heard that bills that might cost some money, even a modest amount of money, may just be dead in the water this year because of the condition of the New Mexico state budget. So can you tell us how the budget might impact new bills coming that need funding, and also the state of the budget, how that might increase the likelihood of passing bills that might increase our revenue by closing some loopholes?
No, it's a great question. And we just finished on Tuesday a special session that spent $329 million of CARES money that had been earmarked into the general fund that took our reserves from 35% to 31%. Now that's a lot of reserves. Each 1% is about $72 million. So we have over $2 billion in reserves. It's non-recurring money though. And I just want to stress that one of the things we've got to be very careful about is not starting new programs using one-time money. And so your question about, okay, what are we going to do? Are we just going to say we're done? The answer is no. And I'll start with the loophole question, because I do think part of what we should do in this coming session is put together a serious tax reform package that also can raise some revenue. And it's something that we did a little bit of in 2019, and I give huge shout out to the House and Jim Trujillo, who was chair of the tax committee. And we actually, it's quite extraordinary. That was the final morning of the session, and Saturday morning when we were up in the governor's conference room finalizing that deal. But I really do think that there's an opportunity to put some progressivity back into the tax code, both the income tax and also the corporate tax. Certainly part of the 2013 bill that we passed that lowered the corporate tax, brought that rate down. Of course, in 2017 at the federal level, those same corporations got a massive, massive federal tax cut. And so again, I think we should look at potentially phasing some of that back in to raise some revenues. We also need to lower the gross receipts tax. It's really a problem in our system because we've, you know, for 40 to 50 years, we've carved away at the base, and the base is narrowed and the rates have gotten high. Here's the challenge: to lower the gross receipts tax by 0.25% is between 160 and $200 million. So think about that. I mean, if you had a revenue neutral bill, you'd have to go raise that kind of money just to bring it down 0.25%. But I think that there are a whole range. There's $1 billion of exemptions, deductions, credits that all those lobbyists got hired to carve out over the years. And we did in 2017. I'd encourage folks to go back and look at what we did in 2017. We put together a bill that was about $340 million revenue generator that, of course, Governor Martinez vetoed as part of the infamous veto of the legislative branch and higher ed and court cases and all that craziness. But we identified a whole string of exemptions and things that we should look at. And I think those are still sitting there in the tax code, and there's absolutely no reason that we shouldn't go back and revisit that. So certainly it's a new environment, but we need a stable revenue stream. If you look at the revenues over the last 10 years, I always say it's the oil and gas roller coaster, and it's a spike up and down, up and down. It's a terrible way to run any business. You need to have long-term stable revenues, and we need to diversify our economy, obviously. And let me just end by one of the priority bills that everyone has just been out running on, which is legalization of recreational cannabis. And that is something that certainly can also be used as a revenue generator down the road. So I think I've got my stopwatch on now, Paul, so you don't get me in trouble, but there's 4 minutes. But I do think it's a great question, and we're going to be creative, and that the new finance chair will play a huge role in that. So looking forward to really working on those issues.
Great, thank you.
We're right on time. We actually padded it a bit, so because we knew who we were talking to.
And I just want to say, because there's a lot of chat going on in the chat room, and people are asking about specific bills. That was one of them. So good that you mentioned it. We are going to get to speaking about some specific bills a little bit later. So be patient and put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many of them as we can starting around 7:30. So the next question is basically for any of the three of you would like to answer. And if the answers are brief, all three of you can answer. So Retake has developed a somewhat expanded advocacy strategy for the 2021 session. And we're starting that now, or we've been working on it for, back in November. So we will have teams of advocates across the state in every Democratic Senate district. And we're focusing on the Senate because the House is a lot bigger, and we're less worried about the House than we might be about the Senate, although we're very optimistic about the quote unquote new Senate this year.
The happy place.
The happy caucus. I like that. So these teams of constituents are going to be reaching out to their senators and scheduling Zoom calls or Zoom meetings with them in advance to talk to them about the issues that they care about and how, and ask their senators how they feel about those issues. Because one of the things that I always said for the last few years that I've been going to the Roundhouse is when I sit in those committee hearings, and all those committee members walk in and sit down, I always feel like that maybe they already have their mind made up by the time they get in the room. And I know that isn't always true, but I think that, they've probably done their homework and they're probably pretty clear on how they're going to be voting. So we're going to try to get to you earlier this year. So we're still going to do our daily alerts during the session as well. And so you'll be getting emails and calls from people, but we're going to do this sort of early strategy too. So what do you think about that strategy? Do you think that that's going to be effective? Just any thoughts about that?
Just jump.
Well,
Speaking.
I would say don't forget about the House. We do have several new members, two of which are already members, Tara Lujan and Linda Serrato. They've been sworn in, succeeding Jim Trujillo and Linda Trujillo. So, they will, I'm sure, be glad to hear from you. I know a lot of folks on the webinar are familiar with Cristina Ortez from Taos and Brittany Barreras from Albuquerque, South Valley. Brittany ran. She is the first person ever elected to the state house as an independent, but she has changed her party registration and is now a Democrat and is going to be caucusing with us. I'm sure they would love to hear from you. Our numbers, we went down 1 from 46 to 45, but we had that a little bit of churn. So I'm sure, like I said, our members would be really happy to hear from you. And reaching out in teams is good. And we can certainly get the word out to our caucus that, we hope that they will be responsive and be in touch. And if you have a hard time reaching people, let me know and let Rena know, and we can try to facilitate that. But I'd also say we're very much looking forward to working with Peter and Mimi, or Mimi and Peter, because when nothing on this Zoom so far has made me happier than hearing Senator Stewart describe the Senate as having a happy caucus, because the number of conversations that I've had with Leader Wirth, where he comes over during the last week or two of a session, and we're both just kind of going, oh my God, what's happening in these committees, or what's happening on the floor. So it's great to know that we've got a partnership that Peter and I have forged over the last 4 years. Just an incredibly productive working relationship. Now Peter's got so much, and Mimi have so much new backup from their caucus to help us get all of these great progressive ideas over the finish line. It's a very exciting session coming up.
Peter or Mimi?
Well, let me just say that I like all of your ideas, and I think they're all necessary now. I mean, it's very frustrating to not be able to have town halls and forums. We're stuck with Zoom or WebEx or whatever, but it's turned into a fairly good platform. So I joke with Peter, I do robocalls and send out postcards for forums or town halls, and I get maybe 30 people, and half of them are candidates from other districts or the state auditor or the treasurer or whatever. So I'm looking forward to Zooms from my constituents. I'll be really shocked if that can be pulled off, but I really want it to happen. So, and I'm telling you, our new people want to hear from everyone. So I think it's a great idea. And I urge you to do it as much as you can.
Great, that's good to hear.
Just two things quickly. I want to just give a shout out. I saw that Senator Linda Lopez, I think, is on the group, and she, of course, is our new whip in the Senate. So part of this amazing team with Senator Stewart and Senator-elect Brenda McKenna, who's the caucus chair. So I want to give Linda a shout out. My only comment, and I've said this many times, I think, Paul, I met you for the very first time doing a League of Women Voters advocacy seminar, kind of how to access. And the one thing that I would just stress is remember that the most effective way to communicate and to make a difference is to make sure that the constituents of that particular member are the ones that are lobbying. In other words, having 1,000 people lobby me when generally we know, pretty much what direction I'm going to go on most issues is not as effective as having targeted advocacy. And you don't want the Santa Fe folks lobbying, the senator from Silver City. Get your Silver City group to talk directly to that person. And I just think, I can't stress enough how important that individual representation is in each of these districts. So that's just a comment that I know I've said many times, and I know you've done a very good job of doing exactly that by broadening the reach of RETAPE.
Well, it's funny because Mimi was saying, the Zoom. If we were holding this meeting in Santa Fe at 1420, we'd have 60, 70 people, and we've got 270 people.
And they're
from all over the state.
Right.
And so we're following exactly your advice, Senator Wirth. in that all of those district-specific teams are completely comprised of constituents of that senator. No Santa Fe, people mucking up with any of that. So thank you for that. Let's talk about some of our high priority bills for the session. We have 15 bills that we consider transformational and 27, now 28 actually, second tier priority bills. Obviously, these are not bills yet, and we know that. But many are written or very close to being done and will be introduced in January. And so let's start with two that have been around a long time. So you're going to certainly be familiar with them. And they're bills that have historically died in the Senate. So Senator Wirth, what are the prospects for the Health Security Act and the permanent fund increase for early childhood? And I want to add to that Senator Stewart just mentioned, was quoted in the New Mexican as saying she can't find anyone who's opposed to using the permanent fund for early childhood.
Or decrim abortion too.
Yeah, or decrim abortion.
You included that in.
But if the amendment, if that amendment is to make sense, a 1% increase in early childhood funding from the permanent fund can't also be for, K-12 as well. It's like that would require it to go to maybe 1.5 or 2%. Can you comment on that, and maybe Senator Stewart?
So I certainly can. I think the issue of using returns from the permanent fund for early childhood and for education are, again, one of those issues that I think was absolutely front and center in this election. And I'm going to do everything in my power, and I think, Senator Stewart will as well, to make sure that joint resolution, remember, we can't make the change.
Right.
All we can do is send it to the voters. And this issue has been around for 10 plus years. Senator Michael Sanchez carried it for many years, and it always got stuck in the Senate Finance Committee. And then in the Senate Rules Committee recently, couldn't get out of that committee. And so I do think this is something that, again, when going back to the issue we talked about up front about diversifying our revenue streams, that taking an additional amount from the permanent fund for early childhood. And I also think looking at that for some educational pieces, Yazzie Martinez is sitting right there. We have a court that has found that we need to fully fund and fulfill our constitutional duty when it comes to education. And so I do think that it's worth having the discussion of potentially doing more than just early childhood. We've passed this back and forth. One bill that did come out of the Senate was a K-12, I believe, out of Senator Padilla carried one year, and that did make it across. But no question, this is one that the voters have spoken about, and I've always supported it, and I just think it's time for it to happen. Health Security Act, again, I smile because this goes back to Max Call and Lucky Varela. Paul and Roxanne, before your time, I replaced Max Call in the House in 2004, and he and Lucky Varela were champions for this all these years. I've always supported it. I think, the version the last couple of years has been a study of some kind that hasn't gone through. So again, I think let's look at exactly what version is coming. That's probably a bigger lift just because of the magnitude of the change that's going to trigger. But again, I think that it certainly is something that we should look at and need to look at.
Okay.
That's good to hear.
Anybody else have a comment on that? Senator Stewart?
Or
I think that the legislature has been focused on early childhood. It's just that we have not put enough funding in yet. And now that we have a new department that is really looking at trying to improve the quality of all of our early childhood programs, those programs need additional funding. So, yeah, I mean, as my job is to make sure that I'm talking to all of our senators People who have voted against the early childhood amendment before have said to me that they've changed their mind. So I think it will pass. I do think it makes sense for us to look at other funding besides just early childhood because of Yasi Martinez. It's just front and center all the time. So I think if we can diversify our economy, totally in agreement with what Senator Peter Wirth said about the tax reform. That's really what we need to do, along with adult use cannabis, et cetera. I think we will diversify the economy, and then we will be much better, in a better position to fund early childhood the way it needs to be, and K-12. So I just think that we're in a better position to make all these changes.
That's great to hear.
Brian, do you have anything to add, or?
On early childhood education, all I can say is I have literally lost track of how many times I've voted for it, and we will keep it up. And yeah, we've already got Representatives Javier Martinez and Mo Maestas are chomping at the bit. We've had some preliminary conversations about putting a package together of bills to get up to the governor early. One that I want to get in there is the abortion decriminalization statute. I'd love to have that done early in the session. I think it might send a good message if we send the resolution to the voters early in the session for the early childhood education amendment. But we will get it done. I have no doubt, and hopefully early in the session. But then the thing is, Paul, and Roxanne, your group is going to have to keep up the work on that, because it's one thing to send it to the voters. It's another thing to to convince the voters to adopt it. And when this was done in 2003 for the Yes on 1 and 2 campaign for the first amendment to the Constitution to put more money out of the Early Childhood Education Fund, I think it passed by 1%. It was like 50.5 to 49.5. It barely passed. So we can't take for granted that it will pass. So this is really, as Peter said, this is the first step, and we've got to keep up a sustained effort to convince the voters it's a good idea.
We have to do a big public education campaign.
Okay, well, we're up for that. So we're going to go through 4 quick bills here. These are the energy and environment bills that we have on our list. And we've got 8 minutes for all 4. So the first is just to increase the bonding levels on the gas and oil leases right now. I've read various estimates of us being exposed to about $2 billion in exposure for remediating those wells. So that's one bill that I think is coming from the state land office. Obviously they can't introduce it, but they're pushing it. Any comments on that?
Yes.
Yes. I don't think I think the limits have not been increased since the 1970s.
That's right.
And I remember I looked back in 2006.
We did increase the bonding limits. We did increase the bond requirements 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. But it has not proven to be sufficient. And we bumped it up. I think the blanket bond amount went from 25,000 to 50, or 50 to 100,000. But it's still way too low. So we did do it a few years ago, didn't get far enough, and we need to clarify the authority of the Oil Conservation Division to really get in there and force these cleanups to occur. There's some jurisdictional issues that we need to look at to make sure it happens, but empowering the Oil Conservation Division here is, I think, the way to go, and making sure that those bond requirements, if we can also make them retroactive, is another point. And that is, we've got a lot of these wells that are owned and controlled by operators that have drilled them a long time ago, but they're still active drilling or active operating in New Mexico. We should go back to them and have them increase their bond amount to cover all the wells that have been done since they filed their first blanket bond, sometimes 10, 15 years ago. So that's another piece that we've got to make sure we get it right when we do the bill.
Let's move on to the next one, and we'll make sure that Mimi and Peter get a little more to say on the next one or the one after. There's an effort, Liz Stefanik's and Bill Tallman are working on amending the Energy Transition Act in ways that wouldn't impact the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standards, or this closure of San Juan, or the support to workers and the San Juan community. But it would close some loopholes that were inadvertently or possibly inadvertently left in that bill that exposes ratepayers to stranded asset costs for both Palo Verde and for corners and gas operations that PNM is operating, and without PRC being able to review those claims. And so they're working to just clean up that language. Any comments on that?
Nobody wants to go there.
It was
That's a bill that I would have to read first as a co-sponsor of the Energy Transition Act. Some of your comments I don't agree with, but I'll have to read the bill to see. And so it's good sponsors, but I would have to read it to see it.
I'm guessing we're going to hear the same thing from others.
Yeah, I mean, again, I know that there was disagreement on the Energy Transition Act, and I know, you know, that you all had some issues with it. It was a compromise piece of legislation that I think has been transformative for our state in many areas. You can always look at tweaking some things, but one person's minor little cleanup may be undoing part of an overall compromise that got an RPS standard that we never would have gotten otherwise. And so again, I'd certainly want to, you know, take a look at that and see exactly what it does, what's being proposed, and how it would work.
Okay,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do need to say, you know, that, you know, you had the three of the main sponsors of the ETA with you right now. And it was only about, I think, 2.5 months ago that the PRC approved $1 billion of investment in renewables and what will be the largest battery storage project in the United States, with an emphasis on making that investment in some of the poorest and most underserved communities in the state. Central Consolidated School District, Northern Rio Arriba County, with the Jicarilla Apache Nation being a beneficiary, Marys of the Navajo Nation, McKinley County. That's real. I mean, that is a massive investment in renewables and battery storage. And I'm proud that New Mexico is literally leading the country in moving towards an emissions-free and renewable electricity future on one of the most aggressive timelines in the world.
I knew I was talking to a tough audience on that one. Let's move. We're starting to get behind, so we'll try and make it a little bit quicker. The local choice energy is a bill that would allow cities, counties, and tribes to purchase and or generate their own energy. Any comments on that? That's been a bill that's been around. Somebody.
You know, like, we'll be happy to take a look at it. It sounds like it might be similar to community solar. I do know that municipalities in New Mexico do have already the authority to generate their own electricity. The city of Farmington does it. The city of Farmington owns its own utility, or, you know, produces. PNM is not, doesn't serve the people of Farmington. Santa Fe used to have its own utility, so it's possible. I'm happy to look at it. I have sponsored and supported the Community Solar Act for years, and if we can do things to move that ball forward, I'm happy to support it.
Yeah, I think that Senator Steinborn and Shendo had the bill in 2019, but I don't remember hearing it in committee. So it's one of those that may have been around, but I just don't remember having the debate, unlike the debate we'll all remember about community solar in 2019. And that one really has
Uh-oh.
You're frozen, Peter.
What Peter is saying is that he fully supports the local choice energy bill. But Peter froze, and
wait,
so
he's back,
he
I
didn't
think.
get a chance to really say it.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, we haven't, oops, internet's unstable. I don't know what's going on there. Well, welcome to connectivity issues even in Santa Fe. It's hard to get decent internet speed, which is another issue we need to deal with, is broadband on all levels. But no, I was just going to say that I think this is one that we do. I want to hear the bill. I mean, I know it's been around, but we just haven't, I don't remember hearing it in committee. So certainly willing to look at it. I think what you run into is the argument you immediately get, which is the same argument we got with community solar, is that it's retail wheeling. And somehow it's, you know, the investor-owned utility puts up the guard and tries to stop that. And I just think this is an opportunity with community solar where, you know, we're really going to push that. It needs to be pushed. And so I'm certainly willing to look at local choice.
Mimi, did you have anything to add, or should we move on?
You should move on. I haven't heard the bill either in any of my committees. It sounds good. So willing to listen.
Make sure you get nice one-page summaries. The last one is the Green Amendment, and that's a bill that would go to the voters. It's a constitutional amendment that would allow voters to decide if they deserve the constitutionally protected right to clean air, water, and land. How do you see this bill? And I sent information to you all this afternoon that gave a bit more information on it, because that's new.
So I've heard about the Green Amendment. I'm part of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators. And we had a presentation by the author of the book, The Green Amendment, Maya Van Rossen. So several of my colleagues are interested in doing it. You know, we already have a provision in our Constitution. The idea behind this would be that it would make it more robust, and that it would make it more of a right, a civil right. So I think we'll be messing around with the language so that we get it right. But I think it's a good thing for the future. We have to deal with climate change in the Southwest. We really need to do it in a robust way. Was part of the point of the Energy Transition Act. This would be another tool. It would allow the citizenry to have more of a say, making it a civil right. So I hope we pass it, but we'll be messing with the language for a while.
Okay. Any other comments?
Well, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to plug what I think is likely to be one of my absolute top priorities, which is passage of the New Mexico Civil Rights Act. Senator Stewart's correct that we are one of the few states in the country that already has in our state constitution environmental provisions guaranteeing people the right to basically have a healthy environment to live in. With the passage of the Civil Rights Act, that is something that could be vindicated upon passage of that law. We wouldn't have to wait for an amendment to the Constitution. It would also allow citizens or residents of New Mexico to vindicate all of their state constitutional rights in state court, and would get rid of the defense of qualified immunity. I think the ability for that bill to have really just dramatic effects in improving the lives of New Mexicans is can't really be overstated. And combining that with some legislation that we're going to be running on the environment in the House, increasing penalties for oil and gas companies that break the rules and pollute, equalizing them with the penalty levels of the Environment Department, for example. We're going to have legislation dealing with leak detection and repair. And we may also, depending on what the final rule is on methane, be looking at legislation to eliminate some of the loopholes in the proposed methane rules that we've seen that would exempt up to 90% of operators from the new methane rules. So there's several more things that we're working on there. Also, we're going to be working to repeal the no more stringent than language that is in many of our environmental laws that restricts the state's ability to impose environmental regulations that are more stringent than their federal counterparts. That's going to be an absolute top priority that will really empower state government to make sure that our air and water are protected and clean now and many years into the future.
Okay.
Great. Great.
All right, we're going to move on. We're going to obviously run just a couple minutes over, and we'll just.
We should add state.
Okay.
That much time. Okay. So we have heard that Senator Wirth and new Speaker Egolf are working on some kind of climate change omnibus bill. Can you tell us anything about that?
In 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I can tell you that I certainly, climate is a absolute priority, but in terms of me having the omnibus bill at this moment, I do not. I certainly, you know, there's a number of different ideas being discussed out there. I know Senator Stewart has been working on something. I do think that, you know, the question is, you know, how far do we go, and being able to put in some mandatory requirements to reduce the percentage of greenhouse gases certainly is something I believe in, and I think needs to happen. How exactly that's going to happen is to be determined. We're going to be working on this, you know, in our caucus. So again, I think that's my answer as we sit here on the last day of November after an election and a special session, and we're just transitioning into really gearing up for a very important session.
I can say we've had one full-time staff person in my office, assisted with 2 interns who have received a grant to focus on putting together a climate package that is nearing some of the final stages of completion. That includes things like great expansion of electric vehicles, increasing the deployment of renewable energy around the state, vehicle charging stations, sustainable building tax credit changes to incentivize people to retrofit or remodel their homes to make them more energy efficient. We're also looking at codifying emissions limits for the entire state in state law. So we would have industry or sector specific targets to limit emissions levels. That last piece is a bit of a work in progress, and we're not sure who's going to, you know, how that's coming together, but we've got a very, very broad group of environmental organizations working on that, and we hope to have something to announce in the next few weeks.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we have a lightning round that we were going to use, and so rather than discussing these bills, you can do thumbs up or like this in terms of your thinking in terms of the likelihood of these bills working their way through. And we may circle back and come back to one of them because we had wanted to devote a whole 3 minutes to it. That's this one, public bank. Have you any views on the likelihood of the public bank getting through the legislature this session?
I mean, I think this goes back, Speaker Egolf, one of the very first bills you did as a freshman House member that made it all.
OG public banker.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, well, last session we couldn't even get a memorial out of Senate rules. So I mean, I do think this is an important discussion, and have been on a number of Zooms talking just about this issue. And so again, I want to take a look at exactly what it looks like, because again, we've had a variety of different versions of it, but certainly it's an important discussion, and something that, let me say again, a number of our new members ran on the issue of a public bank and have brought it up to us in caucus. So I think it's something we definitely need to look into, and I can't say whether it's going to pass or not, because again, there's lots of variables with that, but certainly I'm supportive.
Okay. Ms. Stewart, anything?
Well, you know, I think the issue for me is that we have 33 community banks already in this state. And there's only one other state with a state bank. The problem is that you can't get a federal insurance for your state bank. North Dakota has no insurance for their state bank. So I want to look at what it would provide that our community banks don't, because the community banks are just insured by the state, or some of them are federal also. And they ought to be doing, I think, what is talked about with the state bank. So I need to learn more about it, and I need to look at it in conjunction with what our community banks do and the service that they offer for the state.
Okay, so we're going to run by a couple more. Abortion decrim, thumbs up, I'm assuming, everybody. That's certainty.
What we've been hearing, yeah, that's great.
Week 2, it should be done. 36% interest cap on small loans. Is that going to work its way through this time?
Maybe.
I hope.
Yeah.
It's been around forever. I carried the bill. I carried the bill for Attorney General Gary King. And I voted against the quote unquote 170% compromise, which I just was amazed that that's what we did. But again, I certainly support it.
I think we're ready for it.
Political will there. Paid sick leave.
We need that. We need it. It should be part of our COVID bills. We'll just have to look at it to make sure we get it right.
Yep. Huge debate in the special session about essential workers. And my goodness, I would hope all of our good Republican colleagues that made so much noise about essential workers and COVID are ready to step up for some paid sick leave to help them, and maybe some wage increases to help them. I just, that was very frustrating because it's something we really care about. And if ever there's a time when that just cries out for having paid sick leave, I mean,
it's now.
It's right now. So.
So the last thing we'll just ask is if you can each take 1 minute to sum up, and then we'll go to questions and answers. Speaker, you're first.
How about ladies first?
All right.
Madam President-elect.
All right. Well, thank you very much for this forum. I've been trying to read the chats. There's a lot of great people on this. I have a lot of work to do between now and the beginning of the session. It's really fun doing the work. I'm getting a lot of feedback from people about how I ought to be doing the job. A lot of people have reached out to me saying, talk to me. I know how to make the Finance Committee work better. I'm going to take up all of those people on their offers. Some of them are long-term analysts that have worked for the committee. I'm just very excited about the session. I'm very excited about the Senate. We have so many of our members that are showing up on the chat. Also, Saya Correa-Hemphill, another new senator, is there. So I think we now have both a Senate and a House that we're going to work together. I certainly served in the House long enough with Speaker Egolf to understand where he's coming from. It's mostly where I come from too. So I think we've put together a good team and that we're excited about working together, and I feel very hopeful and positive. And I appreciate the input, and I appreciate what you all did in the elections. So I think we're ready to go, and I appreciate this forum.
Thank you.
Senator Wirth.
Yeah, I'll just ditto. It's an incredibly exciting time, and I just a huge shout out to all of our members that are on the chat and those that aren't on the chat. It feels like a very different chamber that we're going to be part of. And I just want to say this, in this business, you very rarely get opportunities where the stars kind of align. And I feel like we have one of those opportunities. We did some extraordinary things in 2019 and 2020, but we were constrained by the vote count and what we were able to do. And gun safety was a perfect example. We barely got those bills through with 22 votes. And I just feel like when you get a chance like this, you really have to go. And so I meant what I said up front. When you go down the list of issues that have been around a long time, we may not agree on all of them, but there's an awful lot of them that I think we can finally kind of check the list and move on to the next one. So it's super exciting. Stay involved, everyone. I know it's hard doing this in this new format, but in some ways, it's actually better. It's easier to have public input. So again, thank you, Paul and Roxanne, and to everyone out there who's listening. We really appreciate the chance to just share some thoughts with all of you.
And don't go yet, anybody. We're still going to get to the attendee Q&A.
All right.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, anyway, super excited to get to work. And yeah, I hope that folks watching see that the three legislators on this webinar, we've known each other for a long time. We like each other and we work well together. And, you know, Peter talks about the stars aligning. This group, along with our whole leadership team and our newly and increasingly diverse caucuses, I think are going to be able to come together in January and really deliver on all the things that we've been pushing for these last few years that just couldn't quite get over the finish line.
That's great. Okay, so we've got a little over 20 minutes. We're going to try to get to as many as the Q&A. There's 57 questions in here. So we're just going to, and if you are three panelists, if you click on the Q&A icon at the bottom, then the little window will pop up and you can see them as well. If there's one that you see scrolling through that you're really eager to answer, just let us know. But we'll just start with the first question that got posted, and we're not going to do everyone. If we think it's already been discussed, we're going to skip that one. We apologize in advance. Most of these are not going to get answered, so I'm sorry about that. We're doing our best. So what about, do you want to go, should we, the first one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Cheryl Hastings is asking, can we talk about legislation to protect our water? Is there anything in the works for that?
Oh, that's way too long of a question. That could take the next 20 minutes. So we're working on water, always, always.
So I'll give you a quick one though, because I do think it's important in the context of the Texas v. New Mexico lawsuit. And one of the things that's really critical is that we give farmers the ability to deal with a limited resource amongst themselves. So up in the San Luis Valley, they've created their own taxing district and they manage their own water with a limited supply. And so I think this is something that is going to be coming down the road, is giving farmers the ability to control themselves who gets the water, and it's not done just based on a priority system, which has some really unintended consequences.
Okay. Paul, did you find one that you want to ask?
I'm looking because there's somebody, boy, this is daunting when you've got this many questions and we want to be fair.
Let's go back up then.
Yeah. Sorry about this, guys.
Unless you want to just ask this one.
Yeah. Is there a way to focus on economic development and not taxes as a way to increase revenues?
And that's from Maggie Werner Washburn.
And she goes on a bit more, but basically saying that.
But that's the question.
Yeah.
Yes. And, you know, over the last, especially the last 2 years, we've been able to make major strides in diversifying our economy. You know, just look for film and TV. It's been like 4 days since Netflix announced they're adding another $1 billion on their investment in Albuquerque to make us a major production hub. Aerospace, Virgin Galactic, Sky, which is a company that is going to use dirigibles to broadcast free or very low cost Wi-Fi over the entire state. Aerospace, film and TV, biotech, clean manufacturing, places like Descartes Labs here in Santa Fe, high tech in Albuquerque. It's here, and all of these things, you know, one of the things I like to say is New Mexico has everything that any state could ever want or need in order to become the next it state. We've got the people, we've got the resources, we've got now the political leadership to make us a shining example to the rest of the country. And we've started the work, and there's a lot more to come in economic diversification. We're going to announce in a few weeks what we're going to call our Rural New Mexico Moonshot, to try to really invest in value-added agriculture, water efficiency, and giving an opportunity for people in rural communities to have access not just to broadband, but to financial literacy and access to capital, so that they can make important investments in rural entrepreneurs and rural businesses as well. So there is a lot that we can do there.
Okay. And economic development doesn't really progress unless you have an excellent educational system. Our focus on improving our educational system will really help us develop economic prosperity.
And just real quick, I just also don't, on the list, outdoor rec. Look at this incredible state that we live in. I mean, it's one of the few things during COVID that we've been able to do is be outside. And that's another area that we've done a really good job and we need to continue working on. So I agree, whole range of issues.
And Roxanne and Paul, we need to give a shout out and a notice. Our state auditor is with us. He's in the chat. He's saying hello, and he's reminding me of my favorite economic development line for New Mexico Aerospace, which is when you launch at the Spaceport America, the first mile to space is free. You burn 17% less fuel to put something into orbit when you launch in New Mexico as compared to Florida.
Interesting. Okay. Here's a question from Jay Levine. New Mexico is a major oil and gas exporter. Oil and gas interests are major donors to legislators. We have a serious problem with environmental damage and the human costs from oil and gas extraction. And the climate crisis, of course. If we are still extracting oil and gas like we are now, by 2030, the climate catastrophe will be beyond our comprehension. How do we turn this around?
And the last part of it is an aggressive RPS means very little if all of this oil and gas is being burned elsewhere.
So the point is that we're exporting our oil and gas, whether we burn it here or not.
I mean, I think, so let me just say, there's no question that the diversification of our economy is critical. And as we move, forward and continue to push, that has to happen. And so I think the criticism about the export issue is a valid one. Our challenge right now is, again, and I think this goes back to the question you asked right up front. Well, there may not be new money for all these new programs we want to start. And so this all ties together to the need to diversify our economy and really transition away. And it's a challenging issue. There is no question, because the export piece is there and you can't deny that. But I just think it's something that needs to be prioritized, and we'll continue to work on this. Is it a line in the sand where you just say, tomorrow we're not going to do it? That's not the approach that I think makes sense, but I do think we need to push extremely hard to make that transition happen.
And I agree. We've got to have this transition. You don't want to take one thing that is 40% of our state's budget and replace it with something else that's 40%, right? You want to replace it with 10 things that are 4% each. It takes time to develop that. We've got all these irons in the fire so that we can have things grow up and take over the budgetary position that oil and gas serves right now. We are over dependent. We're working to break that. And in the meantime, we're going to see very, very strong legislation coming out of this session to make sure that bad actors, people that cause pollution events, people that break the rules, are held strictly accountable as we transition towards a clean energy future.
Good.
So a couple people are asking this question. One of them is Wendy Foxworth. What about a paid legislature? Because obviously an unpaid legislature limits the kinds of people who can run for office and participate, people who need to work full time. You're for it. Oh, great. That was easy. They're all for it, everybody.
Remember, let me just say this though. This is another one though that's a constitutional amendment, and it's been tried and it's never passed. So I do think that the will is there. to pass the joint resolution in the legislature, and we should really put this on the list, because the premise of the question is good, but the real issue is on the other side of this, is the will of the voters there to make this happen, but it needs to happen.
Okay, great.
So, we've got a question from Bill Tewald. I hope I said his name correctly, but he's asking, will the state legislature pass legislation that demands that New Mexico not become the repository of more nuclear waste from other states and from other countries? Didn't know we were getting it from other countries, but at least other states. Boy.
We stumped them. You stumped them, Bill.
So the reality is that, and I'm not a supporter of Holtec, which is the most recent project coming to the state. The reality legally is that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and associated federal entities have 100% regulatory control over this. Legislators, the governor, our senators have sent letters opposing this, but because of federal preemption, we can't block it. I wish that weren't true, but there are just some things that the federal government has 100% authority over, and the legislature can't stop it from coming, but we can participate and have been participating through our Radioactive and Hazardous Materials Committee. It's an interim committee that meets to participate in public comments and doing everything that we can to try to shine a light on the situation. Senator Steinborn has been a leader on this, and but legislation is
not the solution.
Basically would be unconstitutional.
Well, we did have a bill, Senator Steinborn, Senate Bill 95 in the 2020 session that we put on the Senate floor, and it would have changed the radioactive waste consultation task force to attempt to give us some more oversight from the state level, and it failed on a 16-25 vote on the Senate floor. So I also want to give a shout out to Senator Steinborn and the work, and Representative Rubio also, who have been leaders really in the outreach, and our governor also has taken a very firm stand on opposing Holtec.
Okay, here's an interesting one from Adam Wasserman. What's the impact if our current governor accepts a cabinet position with our president-elect? Is that what impact is that gonna have on our legislative session coming up?
Hey, I add on to that question, and that is, maybe if she goes to Washington as Health and Human Services cabinet, she can have some influence on the president to change some of the federal rules around Holtec and something like that. She might have his ear. Sorry, go ahead, Senator Stewart.
Oh, I just said I don't want her to leave, but if she's offered a position and she takes it, then Howie Morales would be our governor. And we passed, I think it was a constitutional amendment a number of years ago to put in place a provision so that we can replace a lieutenant governor if something like this happens. So I think he would get to pick his lieutenant governor, and it would have to be confirmed by the Senate. So it would be fairly easy, but.
Barbara for lieutenant governor.
What?
Barbara for lieutenant governor. Roxanne, are you ready?
Oh.
Are you ready? Are you ready to accept the call?
Oh yeah, I'm ready. All right.
Long hours.
I don't like retirement that much anyway. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's going to have that much of an impact. Not that you're not anticipating, if that happens.
Well, it'll be a huge impact. The process is easy, but I think it will be a huge impact.
Okay, all right.
And one more thing, let me just say, having served with then Senator Morales and now working very closely with him as the presiding officer in the Senate. I just want to say that should that happen, the state will continue to be in good hands. He is a very decent, incredibly hardworking individual. And again, it would be, it will be a major change. I mean, just like the 2019 session coming right out of the election, there was just chaos because the governor didn't have her team together, and now you'd have a huge transition. So it will, on top of all the COVID chaos, be challenging, but we'd be in good hands as well with a Governor Morales.
Okay, great. Here's a question from Claudia Reisner about improving rural infrastructure. And this was mentioned earlier in the discussion, but we didn't really talk much about it. So there lots of discussion during the campaign season and during COVID about how fast, reliable, affordable broadband is now a necessity. Is that going to be a priority in the 2021 session?
And I just want to add to that too. We're aware of Senator Padilla's, and I think Shannon Pinto is also part of this, but that to develop rural and tribal infrastructure, but it doesn't have any money attached to it. It's just to set up an agency. Do you think there's any move afoot to put some money behind something like that?
Absolutely. We need to expand broadband. Our students are suffering. It's become very obvious. We need to put money into it. We have a small work group that we're starting in the Senate to try to find out what bills people have started to work on and what we need to do. It's complicated because it involves private companies, private internet companies, et cetera. So we definitely are going to work on it in this session. It's crucial.
Well, and hopefully if the federal government gets its act together and finally does another package, a COVID package and a stimulus package, it'll include a broadband piece. And to the extent they don't, I really think, we'll do another COVID bill first, right when we come in January. And I do think that putting, dollars into, you're right, Paul, the money's got to be there, and we need to do that. And I think we've given Senator Padilla an assurance that that is going to be a priority. It's been a priority, but priorities without the money, two different things.
Right. COVID is teaching us quite a bit.
Yeah. So here's a question. This is anonymous, and it's for you, Brian. And it's a little prickly, but you're tough. You've had prickly questions before. This is related to the small loan interest cap, getting it down to 36% instead of 175. They're saying that from recent campaign filings, they see that you were the top recipient of donations from small lenders. So how can you assure us that industry contributions like that, and this is of course the bigger question that a lot of people have for any legislator, that those contributions will not influence your decision about which committees the bills will be sent to and whether it will even receive a hearing?
Sure. Well, so the bill will certainly receive a hearing. It will go to the appropriate committees in the House and the Senate. And I would just say donations. If what Mr. Anonymous or Ms. Anonymous is saying is true, I am learning it for the first time right now. So I don't know that my reelection committee received any of that money. There may have been a donation or donations to our caucus committee. I'm not aware of them. So if that's the case, like I said, I'm learning about it now. And the way to be assured that it won't influence the decision is just check in with this at the end of the session. Follow the debate and see what folks have to say along the way. We let our committees do the work that they need to do, and I'm sure that it'll work out just fine.
So this isn't putting
Thank you, Brian.
Senator Stewart on the spot, but the Democratic caucus has voted for,
and this is from Marjorie Lucky, this question.
Yes, has voted for a Democratic Party choice for pro tem in the past, and then had Republicans and more conservative Democrats caucus together and vote in a far more conservative Democrat than would have been desired. Did the caucus perhaps take a vote to say we are going to vote together for pro tem? Is there some kind of either explicit or implicit understanding that Senator Stewart's election to the pro tem is a fait accompli?
Well, just not sure how to answer that. I guess we'll see in January. I think I have a support from a whole variety of people in our caucus. I mean, we had 5 of us run. All 5 of us could have done the job. I don't think there's a move afoot to go with the Republicans. I certainly, after serving as long as I have in both the House and the Senate, have inroads with the Republicans. I have one Republican senator who I do education bills with all the time. So I don't know that they would wholesale go with someone else. I don't know that they would have a reason to. So I don't really know. I hope I can ascend to the pro tem with the support of the whole Senate, because the pro tem really is a pro tem for the whole Senate. No, it's not just for the Democrats, it's for everyone. I aim to try to have a Senate that's run as well as or better than it has been in the past. We've had good relationships across the aisle. I don't see that changing. I'm hopeful. I'm an optimist. I don't think it will happen, but if it does, it does, and we'll have to live with it.
Can I just add one thing, Paul? Because I think for the first time since I've been in the Senate, we've had direct discussions about the importance of having our pro tem nominee be the pro tem on opening day, and having that discussion about having all 27 Democrats support the nominee coming out of the caucus. And we've not done that before. And I just would concur with what Senator Stewart said, is that she's got broad support across different spectrums in our caucus and is already doing exactly the kind of job you need to do to ensure that we all walk out there, which is to be inclusive, is to bring people together, to get them all working on the different issues, and that's happening. So I think I was quoted in the paper saying I'm feeling good about the fact that we're going to be able to do that. Certainly helps all the hard work everyone did, where we started to get us to 27. 27 Democrats in a chamber of 42 makes it pretty darn tough to have the numbers run a different direction. But I think we've elected an excellent person to lead us as pro tem, and like Mimi said, we had 4 other terrific candidates who certainly could have done the job. But I think, you know, we're in good hands moving forward.
And you've got that happy caucus too.
Well, so good to hear that.
We both want to thank all 3 of you and all the attendees.
We're really sorry that we couldn't get to most of the questions. The only way we've talked about this, we could make these 2 hours long and, you know, have more time for questions, but, you know, that starts to get a little grueling on Zoom, is our experience. An hour and a half seems to be just about right for everybody. So apologies, but we do want you all to know that this is being recorded, and if you're interested in the chat, which is always lots going on there, we will send that out to all the attendees too, because we have all your emails, and if you're things that you were looking for in the chat that you didn't catch while you were on, we'll send that out to you.
Okay, so thank you very, very much, Senator Stewart, Senator Wirth, and Speaker Egolf. And we will be back in touch with you if we're having any difficulty getting any of your colleagues to participate in Zoom conversations with their constituents, and they will all be constituents. So to everyone out there, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay hopeful. And most of all, stay active, because it's the only way we fix this. And again, thank you and good night.
Thanks so much.
Wear your mask.
Wear your
Yes.
mask.
Yes.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being with us.
It's fun.
Interesting.